Hello everybody, Daz here. I'm very happy to film episode 2 of my personal build Green Lantern. In episode 1 we looked at this Case Labs BH7 case that I didn't even plan to use, but when I get the sample and I review it, I look how things compiled inside, how well thought things was implemented in this particular case. It was total sale for me, and I said, hey, I'm going to use this case because it's just totally awesome. And this will be my workstation for a 3D printer that I have here for almost a month, but I still didn't open it because I tried to get my grip on whole 3D thing concept and try to learn. I'm watching tons of videos, read material and getting ready to make things right, because 3D printing learning curve much more difficult than water cooling, believe me. So the thing is that why I said I'm really excited about things. I really like to make my own builds. I fully realized after my last customer build that when you have to do certain things in the way that customer wants and you disagree maybe at some point, I get really unhappy about it, let's put it this way. I think it partially shows in my video, so my apology if you saw some frustration in that series, but now I have my own decision. I buy whatever I want, I build the exactly way I want, and that makes me totally happy. So I'm really looking forward to make this build total kick-ass. And so far I'm accumulating certain parts that I'd like to use in this computer. Some parts I'm going to reuse. And I have this motherboard that I use, the system that I disassembled already. I use it for my test bench, and there's a good set of DDR4 memory and Intel 66K i5 CPU. Maybe I could go for i7 if I have to buy, but because I have it already and it's kind of close to i7 anyways, I think those two components I'm going to reuse. Regarding the motherboard, I was eyeing a certain motherboard for a while, and that comes from my review of X99 Gigabyte Ultra Gaming motherboard. It was really cool. It was a workstation type of motherboard that was spiced up with a lot of fancy things, like tons of lighting everywhere and lots of bells and whistles. And when I was researching the subject on the whole family of new Gigabyte X99 motherboards, I noticed that actually my personal choice, if I would go to buy Gigabyte X99 motherboard, would be DazMode model. That's exactly what I want, I swear. If I get this model, as example, for example, I would be probably tear apart my personal build and replace my existing motherboard with that one. That's how much I actually like it. And when I learned that DazMode name was transferred on a lower mainstream type of platform, which is Z170, I definitely caught my attention. I thought, listen, I definitely want that mobile to try and I want to build it. And I was almost going to purchase it, then I thought maybe I'll talk to Gigabyte and just in case. And it was really nice to give me exactly board that I wanted. So I have it right here. And it's sponsored, so I get lucky, so I can allocate more funds to more fancy water cooling. So it's really good things for me because I'm still operating on a certain limited budget. And as well, we're going to have, we wouldn't talk about this part today, but I decided to cave for GTX 1080. Because one of my GPUs 980s failed recently, so I'm kind of short of GPU anyways. So I decided, hey, I'm going to need one extra GPU for my personal use, so 1080 will be the model that will be used in this particular build. Also, it's interesting that I wanted to use Gigabyte as well, because this model of motherboard has certain provisioning and features with RGB lighting. And this model has some RGB lighting as well. And before water cooled, I want to play and see how things can integrate it together and how things looks before I actually remove all this stuff that's glowing. So anyways, so why I was looking for this motherboard for my build. First of all, I wanted high-end motherboard and Z170X type of platform. And there was a few models I was considering, and that was one of the models that I was eyeing for. You know, lots of motherboards have the similar features, but what I like about this model, and it's partially I get caught in the marketing in a way, that Gigabyte trying to give some product for people not only game, because for years we have this gaming this and gaming that. It's like people do nothing with computers except play games. But there's a big chunk of people who have to do actual work, such as making videos or making some graphical design and things like this. They want some features that are attributed to workstation. And what Gigabyte did here, as I see it, they took standard platform, which is usually used in mainstream computers or gaming computers, and they tried to see how they can up it up in a way to make it a little bit more like workstation type of motherboard. And I think they succeeded. And for that reason, I like it, because really I need a workstation type of motherboard, but I don't want anything boring. And some traditional features like ambient lighting and stuff like this make it more appealing for people like me. So what I get here? Highlighted features for this model. You have a USB 3.1 type of connectivity. You have two ports on the back. This is kind of future thing. You see more and more type of connectors on many of high-end laptops, because through USB 3.1 you can have a lot of devices attached to motherboard. It probably will eventually replace all standard USB ports. So this is one of the latest trends on the design and the technology related to computers. So they have this. Secondly, they give you some additional opportunities for RAID options. Not only you can do RAID for traditional SATA port, but you can also RAID NVMe type of hard drives. And this is kind of important, because if you content creator, you usually have to have certain massive amount of storage, and you definitely want to protect yourself as much as you could. Of course, backup, nobody cancel backup, but I usually try to use RAID 1 everywhere I go. It double my cost on the storage, but at the same time, it's a small chance that one hard drive or both hard drive will fail simultaneously. So if one hard drive dies, or SSD doesn't matter, so the second one will still have your data. So it doesn't replace your backup, but nevertheless. So NVMe is still expensive bunch of type of SSDs. Comparing with traditional hard drives, but nevertheless, even for that, you still can have it in RAID configuration, which is very nice. The RGB, which is not traditional things for workstation, but it's not workstation motherboard anyways, so they have also this RGB business that we'll discuss a little bit later. I wouldn't connect it today, so I will make a separate video for you when I show how whole things works between motherboard, graphical card and dark side lights, because you can integrate whole thing together. So I definitely will show you how to do it, and then I will water cool it and certain features will be gone. For example, all heatsink from GPU with all lights will be removed. Let's look inside of the box. I don't want to spend too much time on accessories because it's always the same stuff in. I just would like to make a couple comments about things. So what we have here, as always, books, SATA cables, multi-GPU, SLI bridge, and some labels. Same thing as always, but three other items I would like to talk just briefly. So instead of zip ties, they give you Velcro type of cable management thingies. So I think it's much better. I like it more because I think all vendors should do it this way. When you build computer, a lot of things change because of things that just doesn't go as you planned. So Velcro is my always first choice over standard zip ties. You can use zip ties in the end when you've completely done, but Velcro is a nice thing to have. This is not new item, but I want to talk about it quickly. This is a housing that allows you to connect all your front panel cables in this connector, and you just plug it in motherboard. This is quite convenient little thingy that allows you to make a cable assembly a bit nicer way. And you have this cable, which is allows you to connect. I even open it up. There we go. It allows to connect motherboard to any standard RGB light. So you can buy your RGB light from eBay, whatever, like hardware store, and this one side of connector is absolutely standard RGB type of connector. Another side, it's more look like USB 2 type of connector with 4 pins, and that's what you have on your motherboard. So basically, if you want to, you can connect any type of external light, and up to 1 watt of power. That's how you calculate how long it can be. With this motherboard, you can synchronize lights on the motherboard with additional light stream that you have. I also will be making adapter cable that allows to connect dark side type of RGB lights as well, because I use basically a slightly different connector myself. So that's something that we're going to play with as long as we're making this build happening. So let me open the motherboard itself, and we talk about features a little bit. So you see appearance, it's pretty much like black board with a very subtle type of heatsinks, a little bit of blue accent. Maybe it's not what you're looking for. For example, I actually need green, but I don't sweat too much about it because you have those blue things, very small. They also will be covered with a lot of other hardware, so it wouldn't be that much problem. And also with all the lights that I'm planning to install into the case, that will be not a point of concern for me. So what do I have? Standard configuration for motherboard for LGA1151, 4 banks of memory, reinforced with a shielding. We have 3 slots for PCIe. Configuration is, if you use 1 GPU, it will be 16, but second port is already 8, so 2 GPUs, both 8. The last one, still big port, but only 4. PCI slots not only shielded, but they actually also reinforce. So it's not just a little piece of metal around them that make a shielding purpose. They actually goes all the way through the motherboard. So it's increased strength for the motherboard, both pulling away or breaking GPU at least 2 times faults, which is good because if you're planning to move computer and even ship it, so the more strength you have in your system, the better it is. So it's a good thing to have. About RGB, so we just go jumping between technical and not technical type of features. So RGB here, unlike of X99 Ultra Gaming that I had before, when you have lights right on the PCI slots, under your heatsinks, and inside of back I/O ports cover. In this case, you have all lights on back of the motherboard, so nothing will glow on this side. Everything glows on this side. So you have big underglow because there's tons of those little LEDs here going all over the motherboard. So a lot of light will be on the back. So underglow is huge. What you see on this side, the PCB itself has a little bit of semi-translucent lines that will glow a little bit. Again, if you hope to have the similar effect as X99 Ultra Gaming, when you have acrylic block on your GPU and lights shining straight on acrylic block and everything glows pretty well. So you don't even need any 3mm LEDs in that configuration because everything looks so cool just without it by default from the motherboard lightings that you get. Here, if you want any glow, any features on your water cooling part, you have to use additional LEDs the way you did it before. Let's talk more about water cooling as long as we're on the subject. There's a couple ports that I need to take a box. A couple ports that you see here. Gigabyte shows this as a hybrid headers. specifically designed for water cooling and water cooling pumps, I think it's partially misleading. We have those pictures on a lot of Gigabyte motherboards showing D5 pumps with AK tops, and AK did a good job trying to convince the Gigabyte to put it all over the boxes, different models. But for me, it was a little bit confusing because I know that D5 draw 46 watt of power, and no way in the hell you can power it up from the motherboard. So PWM signal fine, so you have a you have voltage coming from, let's say, Molex connector, just from power supply, but PWM signal you can control from the motherboard. That's fine. This always was here. And the picture shows you like you can do it completely, because it says you regulate both voltage and you regulate PWM signal, whatever you want. So I confirmed with Gigabyte that power rating for those connectors, you have one here, you have a double fan connector around CPU area. So one for CPU itself and second for, let's say, for the pump. And you have another one on the bottom. So two of those can be either PWM or can control voltage. But the power rating 1 amp. Don't have this wrong idea that you can power up DDC pump or D5 pump straight from the motherboard. You just blow it, right? So only use it for PWM function, or if you have a really low wattage pump. There's a few in the market, but we'll go into that. Another option how I could use it, if let's say I would like to use a monocolor lighter. You can use this voltage regulator from the motherboard to power up your lights and dim them. So if you have a single color, let's say green strip, that's all you want, you don't want any other color, I actually can control my lights from those two headers, just dim the lights to the level I want. So that's probably one of the things that I might use, but I just want to mention that another way to use it except control PWM device such as pump. Another thing that Gigabyte also saying that instead of standard type of RAID configuration, I already talked about it, with your standard ports, you can also do NVMe type of RAID configuration. But it can be a little bit tricky because let's say you have one NVMe drive in your PCI slot, second one you can be connected to this special connector, and another option that require kind of adapter, you can put M.2 type of adapter thingy that convert M.2 into U2. Then you can, let's say, to do RAID between PCI slot and this, or this and U2 type of connector right there. So it's an interesting feature. I haven't seen it yet on other motherboards. You can correct me. It could be Gigabyte not the first who did it, but nevertheless, it's an interesting feature. And speaking about back to SATA, interesting things that I noticed that you have a total 6 ports as usual. 4 here and 2 of them actually totally in different direction. I think that's actually very clever because sometimes going cables, especially if you use some braided cables and things like this, they're sometimes a little bit stiff, and direction of cables goes this way, maybe work for you, or maybe it doesn't. So you have additional way to, let's say, route your special braided custom-made cables, not only like this, but you actually can go like this, down on the motherboard. So I think I really like this. Some people saying that if you use a GPU in this slot, which I don't know why you want to do it, because it's like slowest type of slot, so better to use those two. Those cables can interfere with the GPU or long card, if you have a really long card. Let's talk about ports quickly. We have a standard PS2 port, which I still like, because some people, believe it or not, use all mechanical keyboards. They're still better than any other stuff you can buy on the market. Things like IBM mainframe keyboard, digital equipment, compact, they're absolutely amazing. I have one myself, and it still beats any fancy mechanical keyboard that made right now. So all stuff sometimes really cool. So we still have a PS2. If you don't use discrete graphics and you use your graphic arrays from CPU, so we have 2 ports here, display port and HDMI port. We have 2 USB 3.1 port that we already talked, so tons of peripherals, you can connect to them. More and more stuff get released, so it's really cool to have this, and I would recommend anybody who's shopping for motherboard to make sure you have USB 3.1 port, at least one of them on the back. And if you download additional driver, you can use it as Thunderbolt compatible type of ports as well. So now it's both USB 3.1 and Thunderbolt with some additional quirks you want to do. One caveat about this USB 3.1 port: if you want to use it as a port for your monitor, it's not that straightforward. So if it goes from your discrete graphics, no problem, but from your CPU, no problem. But if you use additional add-on GPU and you want to route video from that GPU, like 1080 I have right here, and get it out of USB 3.1 for whatever reason, it doesn't go through the motherboard. You have to physically connect your GPU to this additional port right here. It's micro display port, so you have to connect micro display port on the back of motherboard to your GPU, and then you can further route it towards monitor from USB 3.1. So it's kind of convoluted type of solution, but it's better to keep that in mind, that it's, if you want to use it for video output from additional discrete graphics, it's a little bit things you additionally need to do to make it work. I like that they have two ports for your Ethernet, so I always like this part. Sometimes you need you configure some networking equipment, so extra port is always welcome. And the standard set of your connectors for your audio. Amp audio right here, shielded, separate, highlighted with LEDs, so pretty much standard setup for any Z170 type of the motherboard thingy. And last but not least, I always trying to get motherboard which has debugging LED, which is very helpful when you get some sort of trouble, don't know why the system doesn't boot. You have a power button right on the motherboard, which I like as well, because that's how you usually start building computer, not always all cables connected. Reset is less fancy button on the motherboard as well, and the smooth clear button here too, which is kind of strange because usually you have on the back of motherboard, but in this particular case it is right there with along with all other buttons here. And the very last button is a quick OC button that allows you to do certain decent overclock, obviously maybe not as good as something that you do in a manual mode, but nevertheless. And to conclude about standard features, all standard motherboard output connectors for audio, USB 2 and the other stuff, traditionally located on the bottom. They're no different from anything else that you use for years. Another thing that worth mentioning, Gigabyte advertised that they have a big spacing between two PCI slots if you want to use SLI or crossfire configurations that allows additional breathing between your cards in case of you going air-cooled route. That raises sort of suspicion for me that if the spacing would be proprietary, that all water cooling bridges such as EK bridges or water cool, like name it, any other company, whole thing goes out of window. But I confirm that the spacing still absolutely standard, the same you see on any other motherboard. It's 61 millimeters. And what you need to use, if we speak about EK, for example, this will be three slot dual type of terminals that you need to use to connect those GPUs. So there's no danger here if you will think that, oh, this is a special thing because it's how it's presented. It sounds like proprietary, but in fact it's not proprietary, so absolutely no issues to making dual GPU setup with a standard type of bridges that comes from whatever company you decide to buy, Beats Power, EK, Watercool, AlphaCool, all of them. So nothing dangerous right there. Alright guys, that's pretty much it. Not much more I would like to talk about it without plugging the system in. The next video, or maybe video after next video, I'm going to test the whole configuration in air-cooled way without undressing anything to make sure all hardware works. We will play with all RGB options here, connect third-party RGB lights, try to synchronize it with GPU as well. So we will be some fun with that before I actually am going to remove certain parts and going to water cooling route, which is definitely the way I like to have things done. Alright guys, thanks again. Thank you Gigabyte for giving me exactly models that I was going to use anyways. And I'll see you soon with episode 3.